Hi, I'm Peter Fedorov. I'm the CTO at ACG Research, and today I'm going to give you a brief overview of our business analytics engine, which is a platform for economic modeling and simulation of networks and virtual systems. And so what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about the structure of the BAE and then how to create a model. Okay, so basically the BAE is a software platform that runs in the cloud. And essentially it's a very flexible, configurable platform for simulating networks and for simulating data centers and cloud, NFV, and other kind of virtualization. And it's based on demand. So based on whether it's data rate or users or sessions or other type of demand, it creates demand for resources, configures those resources, whether they be applications or servers or switches or routers or the kind of infrastructure. And then we have a very detailed set of cash flows that we create to do an economic simulation or model of those resources. Now, the way this works is that it's a hybrid kind of model where we have Excel input. And with the Excel input, we have a lot of flexibility on how we define models. So there's many different types of Excel inputs where we can create all kinds of different models, whether it be a 5G core or an Open RAN model or a MEC Edge Services model or a router model. There's lots of different models we can create. Once we get a model kind of stabilized where we say, okay, now we know the inputs, we know what we want to model, we have a automated approach to convert this Excel into a web user interface. And then with the web user interface, there's a fixed set of inputs that make it relatively easier for an end user to use a specific model that's for a specific use case. And then also down the road, we have capability for real-time information to do modeling of real networks and showing actually where networks are and the real financial impact of an existing network for a life cycle. So today what I'm going to talk about is the Excel input and how that works and how we create a model. So let's just look. I'm going to give one example of an Excel input. And like I said, every Excel model is going to be slightly different. Well, maybe different in a major way. But what we do is we have a lot of flexibility here. So what we're looking at here is a MEC model, which is essentially an edge compute model that has various types of services and revenue. So on the front end, we just have some input that shows some things like how long do I want the model to run for? It's a 5-year model or 60 months. What's my depreciation period? Some information on cores. So it's just some basic information. Again, this could be multiple types of things we have here. And then also information on data centers. And then we have some information on demand. So we have some examples of some services, which are like AR, VR, edge service or video surveillance service. How many users, what are the data rates for the edge, for central computing, and what's my ARPU and my revenue for those services. And then another example of input information in Excel are costs. So costs of applications, these things can be either annual, yearly recurring, monthly recurring, or they can be non-recurring, they can be CapEx or OpEx, and then they can have growth rates. So again, I don't want to get too much into the details of this, but I just want to explain that this is an Excel input model. Okay, so now let's go. So now this is essentially the BAE platform that you log into, and there are multiple servers for different accounts and different customers, so that you can have your own unique view. This is kind of a demonstration server. So here, what I do is I'm going to say I'm going to create a model. Okay, so when I create a model, I have an option. If I create a generic model, what that essentially means is it's an Excel input. So I'm going to call this model a MEC model, and then I'm going to select a file for this model. And so for the file, basically, I'm going to select the model we were just looking at. which is basically a mech model, and then say, oh, okay, so I gave it a name, I selected the file, and now what's happening is the BAE is importing that Excel spreadsheet. And when it imports the spreadsheet, essentially it parses all the information, the BAE machine readable information in the spreadsheet, and then it runs the model simulation. So that was the time that was being taken there. So now we go in the BAE, we have a dashboard here, and we have some other videos that go through a lot of the details of the dashboard. So I'm not gonna spend so much time on that, but you can see on the front end, the very top level, we have some of these metrics like ROI, RRR, cash flow, etc. We have some dashboard metrics here where we can look at the top CapEx and top OpEx, and then we can look at margin or revenue, etc., and some other things, ways to look at services and service pricing. So we have that at a very high level, and then we have an expense area where we have a hierarchical expense. So here I break it up in this edge, central, labor, and then if I double click on edge, I go in, I see how is the edge made up, and I can export these tables to Excel, and then I can click down again. So basically here we have a hierarchical view, and then over here we have now the cash flow tables, and this is all the cash flows on a year by year, or we can look at it on a monthly basis, and then I can export these files to Excel. And I said there's a lot of other information, but we cover that in some of the other videos. So now what I want to do is let's go back to scenarios. Okay, so every scenario you see here is unique. And the other thing is relative to the Excel, there's a one-to-one correspondence between this Excel file and that scenario. Or if you look at this model here, I have an Excel file, I import the BAE, and that is a specific scenario. Now, one thing that we like to do a lot in modeling is compare different scenarios. So what I did here is I said, okay, here's a scenario, right? And I had a certain level of demand. So now I created a second model, okay, which is a second scenario, okay? And now this has basically just some different demand, just different numbers of users. So now I want to say compare these two scenarios. So let's go to the BAE again. Okay, I'm going to create the scenario. Again, I'll use generic because the other scenarios are the ones with the web user interfaces. And again, we have some other videos on that to explain how that works. But this I'll select generic, and then we'll call this mech 2. And then I'll select the file here, and I'll select this mech version 2, hit OK, and that's going to be importing the data here. So it imports the data, it runs the simulation. Now I have a second scenario. So now I'm looking at this second scenario. So now you say, well, I want to compare these two scenarios. So what I can do here is I click this, I click the second scenario, now I hit compare. Okay, when I go up here to compare, at the very top level, it's going to show me these two scenarios and show the absolute numbers. But then I can also say select the base model. So let's say select mech as the base model. And now what it's going to do is it's going to show the percentage difference in these base models. So there's savings and CapEx, but you see there's negative revenue, negative ROI. So this is, you can either look at the absolute numbers or you can compare them. Now down here, now the question becomes, okay, I understand there's different scenarios, but what are really the key differences between those scenarios? So now here I have a base scenario saying mech, a compare scenario mech, and then by the way, I can select whatever base scenario I want from the list that I'm comparing there. And then this shows top 5. I can go to top 10 here if I want, and it shows at the very top level, here's my revenue, my OpEx and my CapEx for this scenario, revenue, CapEx, and OpEx for the mech scenario, and then it shows the differences here. So here there's negative revenue. This guy has more revenue than this one, but the CapEx and the OpEx here are larger So this shows the differences. And then down here, you can see the specifics of the revenue. So these are the services with the revenue. These are the levels of improvement. And then again, it breaks out the OPEX and the CAPEX and the areas of savings. And it always ranks it from highest to lowest. And if you only want to see the top 5 of these, you hit top 5. If you want to see top 10, you hit the top 10. If you want to see all of them, then you hit all of them, and it breaks them all out. And then down below, we also have FTE comparisons. In this model, we didn't have FTEs, so they weren't in there. But then we can see also compare margin, compare revenue with these, compare cash flow, and then we have NPV, net present value comparisons between the scenarios. Now, one point I should make is I'm just comparing 2 scenarios here, but we could compare as many scenarios as we want. So for example, here's some SD-WAN scenarios. So let's say I want to compare, all these scenarios. I click as many as I want to compare. I go up here, and then you can see I've got a comparison up here of multiple scenarios. And then down here, I can select whichever one I want to do the comparison with, the base and the compare, and it'll break it out in a way that we just showed that. Now, if I want to go, let me go back to the scenarios again. Again, if I want to do a deep dive into the scenario, I just click onto that. It'll bring up the scenario, and I see this information. The one thing I do want to point out is that I didn't show before, is the inventory. So on the inventory side, it'll break out the numbers of servers, and then it'll break out the resources on the inventory, which could be applications or CPE or other things. And with these resources, it's sort of like Excel. You can just select certain resources if you want to display those, and then you can export them to Excel, and then it also breaks out FTEs. So, so with that, I'm going to finish up this video, and I just want to summarize a bit that we have the BAE platform. We can create many types of models. I showed you an example of 2. There's many others, but the basic idea is I import these models into the BAE, I simulate them, and I have a one-to-one correspondence between an Excel model and the scenario. And then later on, we can create web-specific user interfaces, and we do have some other videos showing an example of our 5G user interface.